historic moment. The side from Brazil have knocked out the giants of Italy.
Brazilian clubs at the Club World Cup have really shown up. Every single one, all four of them, made it out of their group. Both of the UEFA Champions League finalists fell victim to them, one of which was eliminated by a Brazilian side. Unfortunately, they were forced to cannibalize themselves in the round of 16, so Palmeiras kept it close, but fell to Chelsea, and now Fluminense is carrying the flag into the semi-finals. But even prior to the summer's tournament, just look at the recent winners of the Copa Libertadores, the premier club competition of South America. 7 of the last 8 winners have been Brazilian sides, with multiple all-Brazilian finals in the last few years as well. And with Argentine clubs slipping and struggling, don't be surprised if you see that happen more and more in the coming years.
A barber, an insurance broker, high school teacher, PE teacher. One of these guys sells Coca-Cola. Their coach is a dentist.
The landscape is changing in Brazil. The rules of ownership are changing in Brazil. And there could be even more changes at a structural level to bring the product of Brazilian club football up to the level of notoriety that the Brazilian national team gets. I mean, even if you aren't familiar with Brazil, you at least know that these dudes play football, right? You don't need to know about their politics or GDP, but everyone knows that they are what most casuals and non-enjoyers of the game think of as the representation of football. So, what was holding them back at the club level, and what is causing them to head on this promising trajectory now? Well, to answer that, I've brought along my good friend Filippo, who you've seen on the channel before. Maybe you watch Tactical Manager TV, but you gotta check out his new channel, Chapéu Football, which covers all things Brazilian football, club and national team in English. You know, it's funny, this channel was born of a conversation Filippo and I had after a recent collaboration. I noticed Brazilian national team videos do well on my channel, and we discussed why there isn't anyone covering Brazilian football in English. Boom, in steps Filippo, the perfect guy for it, and he made a video digging into the financial side of all of this far more, as well as the corruption in Brazilian football. So be sure to check those 2 videos out in particular. I'll link to them below. So yeah, anyway, let's get into it, guys. Brazil has always had more than enough talent for an entertaining product. They have the notoriety internationally, maybe lacking when it comes to coaching, sure, but still, Brazil was getting in their own way when it comes to the popularity of their own club football outside of Brazil itself.
Brazil was the best league in the world probably in the 60s and ultra competitive in the 70s and 80s. It's always been competitive, but if you talk about modern day football or modern day soccer, if you're American, what was holding back the league was essentially lack of professionalism, and the clubs were not privately owned. So there was a lot of internal corruption, debt, disorganization. If you have a club and you don't have one owner, like private ownership, you end up getting a lot of corruption within, disorganization, lack of professionalism. And I think that held back Brazilian clubs to their actual potential. Now, I think it can be much better than it is right now, even though we're seeing drastic improvement in infrastructure, professionalism, quality on the field, a lot of things. I still think it's far from the actual potential.
Now, unfortunately, without money, it can be really difficult to reach your potential. And we're seeing that in Argentina at the moment, where domestic clubs are really struggling. Something that Filippo brought up, which is insane, is how little money you make when you win the Argentine league. $500,000 went to Platense recently. That's crazy.
The winner of the Argentine league, they made less money in rewards than Red Bull Bragantino in Brazil, which was the first team out of the relegation zone.
And so in Argentina, for example, players are leaving the league at the drop of a hat to go and get better wages abroad. We've even seen MLS take some players like Thiago Almada out of Argentina. In Brazil, the top young talents are being sold off to Europe, but with the money Brazilian clubs have, they are enriching themselves with talent from across the continent.
But if you look at the top Brazilian clubs, they're taking away the best South American prospects, right? Like you look at Palmeiras, my team, for example, Piquerez, he's Uruguayan, the left back. Gustavo Gomes, the captain center back, is Paraguayan. Flamengo with Arrascaeta, Richard Hughes from Palmeiras, and many other players. So they're taking away these players from South America because Brazil has more money right now. Brazil is still selling their players to Europe. And the South American clubs are weaker and the Brazilian clubs are stronger.
And if you use the Copa Libertadores as a way of measuring the Brazilian dominance, which I mentioned briefly in the intro, I mean, the numbers are speaking for themselves. 7 of the 8 past winners have all been Brazilian clubs, with River Plate mixed in there from 2018. 4 of the last 6 finals have been all Brazilian affairs. So their stranglehold over the continent is getting tighter and tighter. So that begs the question, how did this happen? Of course, your main continental rivals, as far as leagues go, in Argentina getting weaker, absolutely contributes to Brazil's dominance. In fact, friend of the channel Kevincho just did an entire video on that, which you absolutely should check out if you want an in-depth explanation on why Argentina's first division is falling off so much. But if we look past the struggles that Argentinian clubs are having, much of it down to the financial issues in Argentina, but also down to the head of the AFA, what's changed? What's actually changed in Brazil to facilitate this improvement?
The most important trophy in the history of our club is Copa Libertadores.
Most clubs were non-profit, socio-modeled clubs, and with all the good that they bring, they don't always lead to the best running of the club. But due to the financial strain caused by the pandemic, a new law came into play in 2021 that allowed football clubs to create a SAFI, or Sociedade Anônima do Futebol. That was my Brazilian accent. Not great, I know. Which essentially they could become football corporations that allow private investment into the clubs.
So you could get Brazilian investors, foreign investors, they could literally own the club. And that's been very successful. 1, into injecting money into Brazilian football. 2, making it more professional. And you've seen recently, like Botafogo was a team that wouldn't really win anything. And then they got John Textor, the American investor. He does have his flaws. I know Lyon fans are going to get angry about that. But I mean, he led Botafogo to the most successful year in their history. And that's a historic club in Brazil. They won the Brasileirão and the Libertadores in the same season.
There are still clubs in Brazil that aren't privately owned, the majority of them. This hasn't swept through the league yet, even though you've seen reports lately of Fluminense, as an example, saying that they are ready and willing to listen to offers as they already have plans for SAFI. Just missing an investor. But clubs who have been purchased or received major outside investment haven't shot straight to the top necessarily. There have been some failures along the way. While R9 took over his former side Cruzeiro and managed to get them back up from the second division, that's a success. He restructured the club and paid off debts, but they've been a mid-table club since then. They just escaped relegation in 2023 as well. But hey, from where they were, it's an improvement. Vasco da Gama was purchased by 777 Partners. I mean, just stay away from 777 Partners. The issue that investment company is having caused the suspension of their ownership of Vasco da Gama recently. Just all kinds of issues with them. Many of the clubs they were associated with, they aren't associated with them anymore, but they're locked in a weird legal battle with Vasco da Gama at the moment. But that said, after a few clubs became SAFI clubs, we're not seeing many new clubs join the SAFI ranks. For this year in Brazil's top flight, there are 6: Atlético Mineiro, Botafogo, Cruzeiro, Vasco da Gama, Bahia, and Fortaleza. The most recent one to officialize their status as a SAFI club was Atlético Mineiro in 2023. So that's 30% now being SAFI clubs.
But you're seeing clubs become SAFI and become much more successful, and financially they become very strong. So that changed the aspect that I complained about or talked about earlier in the video, where I said that a lot of these clubs had corruption and lacked professionalism. With the SAFI, you kinda solved that. Not entirely, but to a certain extent.
So is this the direction that every club is heading in? Not really. As mentioned, a club like Fluminense would be interested in it, but it's complicated. Because why? Because socios.
It's a bit of a process because you have to go through the socios and the board. It's not that simple. Like, it's been rumored and it looks like it might happen one day, like Neymar with Santos. It's quite clear that Neymar's dad wants to own Santos at some point, but it's a little complex. You can't just get there like a European club and just say, hey, Adrian, how much is your club? And you're like, $1 billion. I'm like, okay, I got $1 billion. There you go. You can still have the money and still not be able to buy that club if the club doesn't want it. So it's a bit complex, so it takes time.
And there's been a bit of a pattern when it comes to which clubs have actually become SAFIs, right? For example, if you're successful and all is going well, you're still beating the majority of teams and you haven't been left behind by the rest, why would you become a SAFI club?
Usually the ones that become SAFI are more clubs that are in crisis, a lot of debt, not winning trophies or just struggling in one way, shape, or form. Like Palmeiras and Flamengo, unless something major happens, I don't see them becoming privately owned. I don't see it.
Speaking of, what about the clubs that haven't become SAFI? I mean, we've seen that Brazilian clubs are making major money in comparison to other South American clubs. So if they aren't getting foreign investment or outside investment, where is a big portion of it coming from? From the thing that stains football all over the globe in Europe, North America, Africa, all over the place, betting companies. No, not bedding, betting.
Every single club in the first division right now, no exceptions, every single club is sponsored by a betting company. And 90% of them have the betting company as their master sponsor, which is the main one in the jersey. How sustainable is it? We'll find out the next few years. I don't know for how long this can go because there might be some laws that come into place and it can affect the betting companies and the money can dry up. But as of now, a lot of the money coming into the Brazilian clubs comes through betting companies. A lot of it.
Like I said, you see this across football. Argentine clubs like River Plate and Boca also have betting companies on their kits. So this in isolation hasn't led to the growth of Brazilian football, but it has contributed to it in tandem with the SAFIs coming into prominence. Another one, I think it would be difficult to deny that Brazilian clubs opening themselves up to having coaches from outside of Brazil has really contributed to their success. Brazilian coaches don't have the greatest reputations, right? There are always exceptions, of course, but it is a known issue in Brazil. The level of coaching doesn't match with the sheer amount of footballing talent that comes out of the country. Flamengo perhaps started the trend when they brought in Jorge Jesus, the Portuguese manager who led the club to domestic and Copa Libertadores glory. Then, 1 year later, Palmeiras won the Copa Libertadores 2 years in a row, as well as domestic trophies under the guidance of another Portuguese manager, Abel Ferreira. 2 Brazilians won it in a row in 2022 and 2023 with Dorival Jr. and Fernando Diniz. But 2024, Botafogo's triumph of both the league and the Copa Libertadores came while Portuguese manager Artur Jorge was in charge. 4 of the 6 triumphs came with a foreign manager. Oh, and in the 24 final, Botafogo played against Atlético Mineiro, coached by Argentine Gabriel Milito. So it's not the cause, but it's certainly a contributor, bringing in fresh faces from abroad who have fresh ideas that can help to maximize the talent that Brazilian clubs have. And going forward, you can expect things to get better. Well, I mean, nothing is for certain, especially in a place as wild as the Brazilian football scene. But there's a separation of church and state, if you will, that could be on the horizon if all goes to plan. So in most countries, you have entities that control the running of the top league, including assigning referees, marketing of the league, scheduling, and everything else in between, right? These entities ultimately operate underneath the Football Federation. In Italy, you have Lega Serie A, which is under the FIGC, La Liga is under the RFEF, in Spain, etc. In Brazil, with their federation, the CBF, it's a little bit different at the moment.
So right now, CBF controls everything from the league, the Brasileirão, right? The schedule, the refs, honestly, even the money and how it's distributed. It's all CBF. Now, the Brazilian league has 2 groups right now of I believe they're all first division clubs, and they're the biggest clubs in Brazil. And one is called Libra, and the other one is called Liga Forte Futebol. And these 2 leagues, these 2 groups, they want to essentially make a league that is detached from CBF. I mean, it'll still be regulated by CBF and sanctioned by CBF, but these clubs would essentially run the sponsorship deals, they would run the TV rights, they would run the schedule, the refs, right, to make sure the refs are actually good, because that's a big issue in Brazilian football. The refs are not very good. The schedule is a big issue. They're going to essentially fix all of that and market the league better, right? Get the clubs, the Brazilian clubs, in the EAFC video game, the FIFA video game, right? How long has it been since they haven't been there? Market maybe the league a bit better to the world. I think when I talked about untapped potential, the money coming in from foreign and domestic investors will continue to happen and it'll continue to grow. But there's only so much that can get you, right? And then there's the betting companies that can maybe go down, and then new sponsors would have to come in. The other untapped potential of this league that I don't understand why they haven't gotten into it is to market themselves internationally. And I'm not saying it's going to compete with the Premier League. That's not going to happen. But there's a lot of people that are curious about the Brazilian league. They want to see a prospect coming up. I'm sure there are plenty of Chelsea fans that would love to have followed the Estevão's progress over the past year. But a lot of people don't know how to watch this league. They don't know where to find it. And then you want to play with a Brazilian club in FIFA, you can't do it on the AFC. You can't do it because they're not there. So that will help professionalize the league more if these two groups, right, the Libra and Liga Forte, get it done, which I'm 99% certain that it will get done. The matter is when. Within the next probably 2, 3, 4 years, it should happen.
So you can see why at the beginning I asked Filippo what has been holding Brazilian club football back from being a major player in the global framework. Don't get me wrong, they are some of the most supported clubs in the world, but as Filippo was saying, it is so prohibitively difficult to watch the Brasileirão that the majority of people outside of the country and South America just can't be bothered to jump through those hoops, despite the actual entertainment value of the league being incredibly high. Brazilian club football doesn't have a talent or entertainment issue, it has a marketing issue right now. It has, or in some cases had, a lack of professional frameworks amongst many clubs. It has a lack of professionalism when it comes to field conditions and standards, refereeing, etc. And it has a surplus of incompetence in important decision-making positions in Brazilian football, which leads to everything I just said, right?
These are a lot of issues that have to be addressed, and CBF, which is the Brazilian Football Federation, they don't really address it. There's a lot of incompetent people within that federation. There's a lot of alleged corruption, which maybe at this point we don't even call it alleged anymore. And that's what they want to do. They would detach from that. It would be essentially sanctioned and regulated by CBF, but the clubs would be more in control, which in my opinion, it would be better.
If they move in the direction we spoke of, then they will be able to market internationally, which will bring even more money to the league, which will help to improve it even more so. And we would potentially see Brazilian football grow and grow to become a top league worldwide. But hey, there's always room for something to go wrong, unfortunately. With corruption rife across football in general, cutting through the red tape and facing the resistance of those who hold lucrative positions really slows things down. But guys, that's it from me and Filippo here. Again, make sure you subscribe to Chapéu Football, linked below, as Filippo is doing great work to cover Brazilian football, the national team and club football, remember, in English for you. Beyond that, thanks for watching and stay safe. Later.